What is a long arm quilter? I get asked that question a lot. And the answer is we are creative individuals who either quilt a quilt, a combination, or basically one of three ways. The first way is custom. If a quilt is for a wedding, maybe a 50th wedding anniversary or a wedding, and it's a highly intricately pieced quilt, or it could be for a graduation, a significant event in the life of the recipient, you would want to custom quilt that quilt, meaning there is a pattern or something that's put into that quilt that makes it custom. If you think of quilts that have blocks, you would do something custom in that block, stop, break your threads, and go on to the next. I do a lot of custom quilting, but the one that I think that, for me personally, was for my son when he earned his Eagle Scout award, his badge, his merit badge, his Eagle Scout award. He had to complete so many merit badges, and I made him this log cabin quilt right here. But you can, if you can see, I don't know if you can see this. Let me see if I can. I quilted in this small border. It says like one was Indian lore, one was first aid, cooking. I custom quilted and wrote all the merit badges that he had to earn, that he chose to earn to get his Eagle Scout award. This quilt that I have on the quilt frame right now on my long arm is for a wedding in Missouri. It is having a pantograph put on it. That's the second way you can quilt a quilt. It's just a continuous line that you can quilt on a quilt. And you start at one side of the quilt over here, you put your needle down, you tie it off, and you quilt all the way to the other side without stopping and breaking your thread. Which brings you to the third way of quilting. It's called free motion. And that is where I would put my needle down over there, and I would quilt all the way to this other side with just a design that I've got in my head, or that I've doodled on paper, that I've practiced, that I have kind of gotten down. I get asked a lot from my clients when they bring me a quilt, how would I quilt this quilt? How would I quilt it if it was my quilt? And one of the three ways, I'd have to say my favorite is all of them. I like to custom quilt. I like to do pantographs, which is what this is. This is called, in the long arm world, we call this a pantograph. We trace it with a laser light. And I like to free motion. I like to doodle, per se. But the challenge comes in if you were to put your pencil on a piece of paper and draw something continuously for 15-20 minutes. Could you do it without picking your pencil up off the paper? Could you repeat that process over and over and over again for the length of the paper? If it was only, say, 3 inches wide, and then you came back the next 3 inches and did it, could you do that for the length of a paper but the size of a quilt? 75 by 100. Could you do that over and over again? That's what a long arm quilter does. That's what our craft is, or our artistic ability comes in. I like all kinds of quilting. I like custom, I like free motion, and I like pantographs. All quilts can be quilted all three ways. Some quilts specifically call for pantos in the fact that if they're for small children and that quilt is going to be dragged through the mud up to the tree house in front of the TV to watch Scooby-Doo, probably just a panto would be sufficient, or free motion. Custom quilting costs a little bit more, so you probably won't want to spend extra money on a custom quilting job for something that's going to be kind of hauled everywhere. I like all forms of quilting. I don't get time myself to piece that much, but when I do, I think long and hard about how I want to have my own quilt quilted. And I do like all three. I have quilts that have all three different types of quilting. Or you could do a combination of all three, or specifically two. I could take this quilt, I could put a feathered wreath in one of these squares. I could do something else in the opposite square and then go do a feathered wreath. I could, my wreaths are pretty much free motion. I don't know of any quilter who traces a pattern for their feathers, but I like all kinds of quilting, and quilting does make the quilt. So if you're thinking about taking up quilting, think long and hard about how you want to have it quilted. Your backing fabric kind of drives the type of quilting that you'll do. Your pattern definitely drives the type of quilting that you would like to have done on it, as does the fabric, the colors. Thread comes in different textures and weights and colors, obviously, so it all adds up. With so many variables, it adds up to an incredible hobby, an incredible way to create your own artwork, and definitely your own source of creativity. It's been a beautiful spring here along the Continental Divide. I took some pussy willows in the house about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they are still looking fresh and fuzzy on the ends. So happy quilting, and try quilting something today.